Hello, my name is Anthony and thank you for clicking on this video. Because I'm using Linux a lot and I'm working in this environment, I thought it would be a good idea to show you how I use my Linux environment, and many of you might be those of you who are beginners. I thought a video on introduction to the bash, just using the bash terminal would be a good way to see and show you how I basically work. And hopefully you can learn some basic syntax and get used to using the command line. Now, when it comes to Linux, if you don't know how to use the command line, for the most part, it can be a very challenging way to use this operating system. And maybe that's one of the reasons why it's not widely adopted, at least not in the consumer world. But if you can master the skill of navigating the command line, I think it can make your life so much more easier. And it also would give you certain powers that you kind of feel like you can do a lot more. And let's get started. Now, the distro that I'm using is Linux Mint. Now, it doesn't look like Linux Mint, but I do download and I'm using Linux Mint in this particular case. And what I do is generally, because I'm using it on a VirtualBox, which is my host machine is still Linux, but I'm using a virtual machine like VirtualBox and I'm installing Linux Mint in it. Linux Mint by itself has a very rich graphical user interface, and it can slow down my computer. So in order to remove all the bulkiness, I install a Windows Manager, and there are many different types of Windows Manager that eliminates or minimizes the graphical usage of the computer. And I'm using a Windows Manager called Awesome. I know it's a very strange name, but it's called Windows Manager Awesome. If you just Google it or search for it, you should be able to find it. And because of that, my interface is very command line type interface. So, if I basically go to type over here, this is what it looks like. It's a command line interface. Everything in here, there's no graphical experience. It doesn't look rich in graphics. It's in this particular environment, getting used to using the command line is a prerequisite, or else it can be very frustrating. So in order to remove that frustration, I thought of creating a video on how to navigate the bash environment, and let's get started. I will show you I will probably create a video later on as to the commands that I use in order to make and work in Awesome, and also how I'm able to customize my environment for my use case. The shell windows that I use is called Terminator. These have these weird names, but they make my life easier. Sometimes if you're doing a lot of SSHing into different computers, then you might want to use an application called Tmux and all that cool stuff. So I'll have a video on how to set up your environment so that it looks a little geeky if you like it that way. But it also can make yourself be extremely productive when you're working with an environment like this. Now, I use my Linux environment purely for programming, especially when I'm programming in C or when I'm doing web development programming. This is the environment that I use. My servers are running in here. All my code is running in here. All the backend system is working in this particular environment. And yeah, so I don't need the rich interface. I just needed to do a lot of the computing power. I just need it for its computing capabilities. But having said that, this video is all about getting started with bash. The first command that whenever you log into the computer, you'll be basically in a particular directory. Now, what directory would you be greeted with? And in this particular case, and almost in every environment, it is based on your username and your password. And every username and password and every username or login will be associated with a home directory. So the first command that we're going to use and we're going to figure out is called present working directory. So if I type present working directory, which is PWD for short, it tells me that I'm in the home/ansand folder, right? Now, if you log in as a different user, it could be home/username. So normally this name is associated with your username in the system which you and the way you log in. And this is a very handy command because sometimes you might be in a particular folder and you do not know where you are. You want to know where exactly you are. A present working directory will give you the list, your current working directory. It'll give you the path to as to where you are in that full folder chain. Now, folder and directory are going to be interchanged in this particular way, in this context. pwd is present working directory, but you could also very well use folders and it would mean the same thing. Now, when you're in the directory, you might want to know what all files are there in there. What is the content of this directory? And we move to the next command, which is called ls and list. This lists all the folders and files that are there in this directory. Now, generally, if you want to know whether it's a file or a directory, there is another thing you can also add. Now, generally in Linux or in a script like this, scripting language like Bash, even though I put ls, there is something more I could add to this command in order for me to extrapolate more information. So without any options, it just gives me a list of directories. But what if I want to know the file size of the directory? What if I want to know what is the permission of the directory? What if I want to know whether it's a folder or a file, whether it's a hidden file? And there are options that you can add, and almost for many commands and almost all commands, you can add options. So in this particular case, if I do a /alrt, and I'll explain to you what the alrt stands for. LSA is all, list, and the time. Now it gives me everything about the directory. So the same command with a certain option will now represent my list in a more meaningful manner. So now it's giving me the permission that is there associated. We'll talk a little bit more about what these permissions mean. It tells me who created the directory and who owns the directory. We'll talk about that as well in the later part of this video. It tells me the file size of this video. It tells me the date and time it was last modified, the year, and it tells me whether it's a hidden file or whether it's, in this particular case, it just tells me the actual name of the file, because in here, it did not give me all the hidden files. And if you want to make it a hidden file, you can just put a dot before it and it won't be shown, at least in the basic ls. But if you do an ls alrt, it will list all the files that are present in that folder. So as you can see, by just adding a few options, you suddenly have a much more detailed analysis of your folder structure. Imagine getting this done, on your graphical user interface, right? Like even on Windows, when I'm working with my file system, there's certain things like how do I find certain things and how do I search certain things? Using the command line, it just becomes so much more easier as we progress through the tutorial. So as you can see, I hope you're already getting a feel of the power of of how Bash and Linux works. All right. So that's with ls. Now, if you want to know what each of those options are, like lart, and sometimes even I don't know, I'm going to admit I'm not perfect. But what I'm going to do is do something such as ls and /help. Every command will have this help option. And you have to put double slash and a help option. And here it tells you what those options mean. So when we put an ls/alrt, the A stands for all. So do not ignore entries starting with the dots. As I mentioned, dots generally means hidden files. Now list all of them. That's what the small a stands for. Then we put an L. What does L stand for? The L is use a long listing format. So it's listing it in a way that is more elaborate. A, L, and then we use the word R. And the small r is reverse. Reverse order while sorting. Reverse order while sorting. And T stands for time. The newest first. And that's what we're doing. So basically, when you look at the reverse, it's reversing based on the time. So, and then if you are basically telling it in what order you want it to be listed. And then from there, you are reversing that order. So if you look at it, February 24th, which is today's date, is going to be the bottommost, and the one that was on, February 25th, 2020 is going to be that which was the last updated time. Last time it was updated will be in the beginning. So that's really it. This is how you can use these options. All right. Next we're going to talk about is the clear command. And if your script looks like, it's populated and you want to have a much more clear screen, just type in the word clear. So if I type in clear, it clears my shell. And that's a nice way to basically have a clean screen and, and start a new command. Sometimes it can be too populated and you want to have a decluttered screen. Just type in the word clear. The next thing we want to talk about is moving into directories. So now if I put in an ls, we know where I am. If I put in my present working directory, it says I am in home and sand. Say, for example, I want to go into my C programming directory. So how do I change directories? And that's exactly what the command is. It's called cd. cd stands for change directory. Now, if I don't put anything in here, it'll take me to my root directory, which is where I am at home, where I am currently. But if I want to change to a specific directory, all I got to do is cd, and then I can put, like, say, C programming in this particular case, and it takes me to the next directory. If I want to go to a directory that's outside this particular space, I can go, say, for example, if I want to go to my bin directory, which is in the folder of which is in the root folder. So I could basically do cd/bin. And it'll take me to the bin directory. If I want to go and reverse between my previous directory, which is C programming, I want to go back to here. From here, you can do a cd/ and it'll take me to the previous directory. So these are my little handy tools that I use in order for me to navigate between directories. Now, I want to focus on one thing when it comes to changing directories. There's a difference between the / operator and this operator. They both have very different meaning. And if you understand this, it will allow you to move across directories much more easily. All right. So this, in a nutshell, means your home directory. This is very important. This is your home directory. And you can represent your home directory by this symbol. As you can see over here, this basically means this is my home directory. Home/& is equivalent to this. So if I go to cd and do this, it'll just take me to my home directory. This is the short form of my home directory. And my home directory is home/my username. So if there's any folder that's within my home directory, I can literally go to cd this and then type in programs/html and wherever be it, because it's within my home directory. This, starting to use the / operator and then having any other folder beyond that, is taking me to my root file system. And to understand what the root file system is that means it is above and it's beyond your home directory. So if I go to cd ... which is to go to my previous directory, I'm going one layer before that. So it's going to take me to programs. And if I go to cd ... I'm going to go into my present home directory. But what if I do a cd ... again? Now it takes me to my home directory. And if I go to cd ... again, now it takes me to my root directory. And this now here is my root directory. And under my root file system, which is common to every Unix-based, Linux-based system, you will have certain folders that are common. And whenever you type in a cd/, that means you are typing through the root file system. And this is important when you have certain functions or certain programs that are part of the root file system that are not there in your home directory, and then you might want to get them started. For example, if you're using sudo apt-get and you're installing, say, npm, or you're installing, say, gcc, or you're installing some form of your PHP or whatever, or MySQL, depends on what you're using. You might find out that they're always installed in a system that is global to all users. So generally speaking, at this particular point, if you have multiple users using a Linux system, programs in here can be accessible to everyone in that root system. Generally, programs that are there only within your directory are only accessible to you. But in this particular case, they're generally accessible throughout the root system, throughout the whole system, if you have the right permission and privileges. That's what this particular means. This root system, the / means. So if I go to /bin, all the programs in here, and if I have multiple users, they will have access to the programs in here. But today we're just going to focus on the home directory, because I generally work everywhere, and whenever I work, I try to work only in the home directory, because it just makes my home directory and my home system just accessible to me. So even if I want to share my system, it's just every program that I install is within my home root directory, is within my home directory, and that's what we're going to focus on. So if I'm again use a clear screen, and I'm going to go back to my home directory. You just have to type in cd and it will take you to your home directory. your directory will always change by default to your home directory. It'll always take you to your home directory. So let's recap what cd can do in the 3 commands that we used in order for us to navigate this. Okay, so the first thing we did was cd to change directory to a program that I want. So if I can go, I can do an ls, and I can do a cd to say C programming, and it takes me to C programming. If I want to go and switch to the previous folder, I can just use the slash, and it'll take me to my previous folder. If I want to go back a folder, I can go cd dot will take me to a backup folder. All right, and if I want to go and access a directory that is part of the root file system, I have to start with a slash and then type and say bin. And if I want to access a folder part of my home directory, I can just put in this tilde sign and then type in program, the C_programming. And if you want to complete a thing, you can press in tab, PROC, where am I? cd/C programming. And there we go. And if you want to know more about cd, just type in cd/help, and it'll tell you exactly all the different options that are available. And it also explains to you if directory begins with a slash, then the cd path is not used. All the other different types of options. I've rarely used these types of these options, but the ones that I've showed you are the ones that I use all the time. Like to a point, it's almost muscle memory for me. That because I use them all the time. Like these 3 things in cd can help you navigate the file system in and out. And I think that's all you need to know. There are probably someone might say, you need to know this. And I generally feel like just knowing these 3 commands with changing the directory can move you across the full Linux file system at ease. That's how I've been working with the file system, and believe me, it's served me well. The next thing that we're going to focus on is a command called file. Now, if I go to C programming and I type over here, and if I want to know whether it's a folder or it's a file, I don't know what it is, I can just type in the word file and then click in, say, gdb. Then it tells me it's a directory. All right, cd, okay. So if I want to know what's bash notes, and if I click in bash notes, it'll tell me it is an empty file. Or if I put in your file and put your C programming, that's small p, it'll tell me it's a directory. So you can use the file system as a way to figure out whether what is within that folder, whether it's a file, whether it's a directory, just to make sense of it. And in many cases, it also gives you, and if it's a file, it'll also explain to you what type of file it is. So for example, if I go to my C programming and I say I've compiled a file, say a C file, say if I've programmed and I've done, say, have I completed any, so if I do a file /main over here, just to give just to give you some details. So the file will also, if it's an executable, it'll tell me that it's an executable. This is the version it is built for. It is dynamically linked. It'll give you all the other options as well when you use the file system. So it's not just telling you whether it's a file or a directory. Even if it is an executable, it'll give you more information about that file. And it's a very handy tool if you want to know, what type of file it is. I don't necessarily use it all the time, but it's a tool that is very handy when you need to know whether it's a type of, whether, what is that name, what is that particular thing in your folder. And as far as I'm concerned, cd, changing directory, listing what's there in your directory are like the most, like if someone had to track my usage of Linux, and I use Linux around, at least 40 to 50% of my computing time is mostly Linux, and in some cases it's 100% when I'm just spending weeks and weeks programming. And if someone had to just record me and say what are the main commands that I use, it will be ls and cd, and then a few other core commands that I'm going to use. So file is not necessarily on my top 10 list, I would say, the top 10 commands I would use all the time. But I thought it was an easy command for you to grasp, and that's the reason why I wanted to share it. Another command that I feel is very important, especially when you want to search for certain things, is the grep command. But before we get into grep, there are three commands that I generally use. One is called mlocate, one is called grep, and sometimes there is even which, and then there is find. All right, so these are the 4 types of commands that helps you search the systems. Now they're all independent commands; they don't work together like this. Now, if you want to search for a command that is across the whole system, mlocate is a great command. I use this quite often, especially if I want to know, if I've installed, say I've installed the MCU Expresso IDE, and I want to know exactly where it is. So I can just put in MCU Expresso mlocate, and it'll tell me, where exactly is there in my file system. Mlocate works under, it creates a database of all the files. So in order for you to have this, say you install a particular folder or a particular file, the database may not necessarily be updated. So you can just click in your updatedb, and updatedb will, you need sudo access for this. And we'll talk about sudos in this video, but a little time later in this video. And it'll update the database. And what it does is basically creates an index of all the folders in here so that you can use the mlocate command. And mlocate is a great command. It's an easy command. You put in the folder name that you want or the file name that you want, and you type in mlocate. It'll try to search for the whole system for you. Now, it does take a lot more memory because it's storing this information in a database. That's the reason why when I click updatedb, it is literally searching all my file path and creating an index of all the files and folders. So that's what it is. I'm going to put a Ctrl+C. Ctrl+C allows me to stop a process that is taking a lot much time. If I just want to terminate a process, I can put in Ctrl+C. All right. Another command so that's why mlocate is really handy for me. It's a command that I use very often when I've installed something and I do not know where it is in the file system. It works great. Another command that I use quite often is grep. Now grep is grep is a very it's a very powerful command. It can allow you to search in the file. It can also allows you to search information within the file as well as search information across the directory. It's a very powerful tool that way, but it's not easy to use it. So I'm going to show you the way I use it, and someone who's better than me at grep might comment about it, but this is the way I use. Say for example, I've created a main executable. So what I do is say grep. So I use the word grep as like search. I replace the word grep with the word search in my brain at least. And I say search. I want to search everything from this folder onwards. So the current directory where I am right now, I want to search for everything from this folder onwards. So I want to be recursive. I don't want you to just search the top layer. I want to search for every folder from every path from this folder onwards. So I'm going to say grep, search recursively, and I'm going to search for the word main. But I want you to search in the folder C_programming. So this is how I use it. And when I click search, it'll tell me where all the main is. Now, because I was basically listed all the word main in every file that I could find in a lot of files that are out there. And that's what it does. So grep has basically linked search for everything with the word main in it. Which makes almost every C program or C++ program start with the main. So, and even in object files, that's how powerful grep is. It's a tool that that allows me to search very quickly. So the way I use it, just keep this in mind. I use the word grep. I use the option /r, which is recursive. It'll allow me to search not just one folder, but it'll search even inside those folders and subfolders. Then I type in the text that I'm looking for, and this text could be a name of a folder or it could be a name of a file. Let's search for a file that way. Let's search for main.o in this particular case, and then I say the folder that I want. So the folder that I want, if you don't put any folder, you can just put dots. So it'll search from the current folder. If I put / it'll search from the root folder, as we spoke about very earlier. Like these things are common throughout the Unix file system. And if I want to search for a very specific folder, I just put in C programming. And then I can search for the object file main, and it's showing me where exactly does main.o, where all is it listed in this file system. So as far as searching is concerned, use grep and use mlocate, and I think you're good to go. I don't use, there's even find, and then there is, which is also another informative tool. But these two things is what I use almost all the time: grep and mlocate. And it served me well. Now there are other things you can do if you want to do more sophisticated searches. Then yeah, sure. You can. I've never gone into the. I've always figured out a way to use the least amount of tools, the least amount of commands to get my work done. And that's what I'm trying to teach over here. I'm not trying to teach you, all the possibilities of all these commands, because they all are very powerful and they can do a lot of certain things. But that's not what you use a tool. That's not what you use a system for. Use a system and you find the tools that makes your life easier. That's really it. And for me, this is how I use it. Now, you might say it's not the best way to use it. If there's a professional who uses grep and knows the intricacies of grep and find and all those things, would say, why would you use this over this? Use the tool the way you feel comfortable. That's my advice. Okay. So which is another command. So which is great if you want to know, say you have a couple of Python folders, Python libraries installed. And if I put which Python 3, I think it's called. So yeah, so if you don't want to know whether I have a Python 2 or Python 3, where's the folder? If I just put in which Python 3, it'll tell me where exactly the Python where exactly my Python binary is. So which is basically telling me which binary are you using. So if I put a which GCC, it'll tell me this is where it is. If I put GCC8, it'll tell me G++. So it's basically telling me that if this is a command that we're using and is part of the file, if it's part of your path, and I'm going to talk about path 2 shortly. If there's a command it found, it'll tell me where the path is. So if I just installed MCU Espresso, MCU. If I put there, I just want to know if it's. Okay. So it's not clearly working. So yeah, as you can mention, like I don't use it as often because I'm not very comfortable using the command as well. Mlocate is my go-to command when it comes to finding a program through the root file system. And if I want to search for a specific file that I created or a path that I created, I use the grep command. It served me very well. And commands that I'm not very familiar with is probably because I don't use them often. And I don't use them often because I don't find the need to use them often. That's really it. Another command, now we've typed in a lot of these commands and you're like, okay, I want to know, I wrote this command and I want to know, what I wrote and what I typed to get that thing. So another command I'm going to show you is called history. And history just tells me all the commands that we typed so far. So in this whole tutorial that I've done since the beginning, all the commands that we've typed is basically in here, right? At least some of it. Now it also does track, some of my previous commands, because if I've used before, it might track all of them. But in this case, it's just showing you all the things that we just typed. So we typed in all of these commands from here, and that's a list. There you go. History is a great way to know what you have typed and know where you were, what you did. It's just a great way to do this. And if you want to create a script from there, you can just, copy paste some of your things and then create an automated script where you want to go to a directory, build a particular file, come out of the directory, build another particular file, and do all those cool stuff. So history is a command that you might find useful to know, what commands you typed in that particular window. Now let's go into manipulating and creating directories and files. All right. So now we'll move on to the next phase where we're going to talk about, working with and manipulating certain things. So right now what we've done is just viewed certain things, right? We've basically listed our directory, we listed our file, we have changed from one directory to another directory, we have searched. So a lot of it is just, viewing what's part of our file system. Now let's go a little deeper and start to create what we want to create. So I'm going to talk about, few commands that will serve you very, very well. And without this command, you really cannot interact with the shell and make use of it. Whereas normally in a Windows file system or in a graphical user-based system, you just go to click file, new, and we're going to do that type of work, but using the command line. So the first command I'm going to show you is called touch. Now touch basically has two functions. So the first function that it has is that if the file does not exist, it will create the file. Okay, so for example, if I don't have anything over here, I'm going to click say touch touch bash video. So bash video is not there anywhere. We have bash notes, but we don't have bash video. And I'm just going to put this as a text file, video.txt. That creates the file. So now when I do an ls, we can see bash video is created. Now what if bash video is already created? So now if I say put an ls.alrt, and if I have here and we just created it, so it'll be right on below over here. So now we created bash video and it's on February 24th, say around this particular time. So my time is a little inky wonky over here. And say I want to basically update this file, that bash_notes.txt. If I put touch and I put bash_notes, just just observe and see what happens. I click touch bash_notes and I click in ls.alrt. All of a sudden now bash.notes is now the latest timestamp. This is what touch does. So touch, if the file is not created, it will create a new file. And if you touch a file, it will update the timestamp. It just basically says that we've modified the file and that's it. So it's telling the system that we've just modified the file. This is very important if you're doing C++ builds and C builds, and you want to just compile a particular program and you want your program and save, and when you're writing your make files or object files, and normally make will only build if there's a file that is updated that is more recent than what has already been built. And if it's not recent, then it won't build it. So you basically use a touch command to update the timestamp, and then make will say, hey, that file has changed, so now we can build it. So it allows you to program, if you want to compile your code and you want to make, update a particular file, this is a great way to do it. It's very handy when you're using a compiler-based program like C or C++ and using GCC. So touch is a way to, create a file or create specifically a file. If you want to create a folder, you can create and make directory. So we can click make directory bash notes. So now when I do an ls, we have two types of bash notes. We have bash notes.txt, which is a text file, and we have bash notes, which is a folder. And if you want to know what's the difference, I can put here bash notes. And it tells me it's a directory. And if I put bash notes.txt, it'll tell me it's an empty file. That's how you make directory. If you want to remove a directory, just click remove dir. Because it's an empty directory, I can click remove dir. Remove dir only works if there is rmdir stands for remove directory. It only works if there's nothing there in that directory. And since we just created a directory, there was nothing in it, we can remove it. We can also, if you want to remove a file, you can just click remove and click bash notes or bash video in this particular case, which we just created, and it will remove that file, and now it's removed. So remove works for both remove works for files, and remove dir works for remove directory. Now what if I make directory called bash videos? And I go to bash videos and I create another file and I click touch bash notes, or I'll click a bash underscore notes. Actually, you know what? I'm going to show you a command we're going to play with two commands. We're going to use the word command copy or move. So copy allows me to copy a file from one folder to another folder, and move allows me to move a file from one folder to another folder. So I'm going to click copy in this particular case, and I'm going to go to dot stands for the directory before bash videos. So as I mentioned, always takes you to the previous directory. So cp // say bash videos, bash notes.txt, and I'm going to bring this to this directory. So the dot means bring it to this directory. So now when I bring this to this directory, I have bash notes. So now if I want to remove this directory, click bash videos, remove their bash videos. It says I cannot delete this because it is not empty. So in order for me to clean out this directory, I have to empty the folder to remove this directory. So that's where it can get a little annoying, because sometimes you just want to force a directory to be removed without, you trying to remove every single directory and file within that folder, because it can be very, tiresome, and it may not be a good use of your time. So in that case, what I do is called remove/recursive force. So recursive means it's going to delete all the file within that folder or subdirectories within that folder, and force the removals. And now when I click bash_videos, it will remove bash_videos. So you can use remove rf and remove. Remove rf is a way more powerful command, so don't use it unless until you know what you're doing and you are certain that you should be removing this folder. But if you are just removing a particular file, just stick with remove. And if you're removing a specific folder, stick with remove dir. All right. And we did touch on two commands, which is copy and move. So copy, as I mentioned, copies between one folder to another folder. And in copy, again, you need to be very well versed with this syntax, and this syntax, and this syntax. And I'm going to show you all what that means. So as we spoke a little bit earlier, this means you're copying from the roots. You're starting from the root directory. This means you're starting from the home directory. This means you're copying something from a directory above the current directory. That's all it means. And this means the current directory. Okay. So if I do an ls ... it takes me to the previous directory. And if I do an ls ... it takes me to the latest directory. So so dot basically means current directory. It always means current directory. So when I do an ls/lrt, when I do a grep, and if I search for recursive, and I search for say list, just for example, this means current directory. This dot means the current directory. All right, this is very important. Like, know this. And if I do // then it'll start from the previous directory onwards and recursively scan through all the directories from there onwards. And if I do this, it is basically going to scan every single folder in my full file system. And this will take a very long time to search everything. So you might want to use this very sparingly. But that's what these commands, these three types of syntax, or these these 3, 4, 5 keys have very important, very significant. They have a very important role. And if you don't know what they are, I highly recommend you to read through it and play around with it and really practice it to really get a sense of it, because this can frustrate the hell out of you. And if you know it very well, will make you love Linux like no tomorrow. That this to me is what frustrates most users, is not understanding, what's my current directory. How do I move from my previous directory? What's the root file? How do I get to my root file system? What are all these squiggly wiggly lines and slashes and backslashes? This, to me, is the most important concept when it comes to shell scripting and using the shell. It gets frustrating for a beginner, but believe me, it's just these 3, 4, keys, and it'll make your life so much more easier. All right. So as we mentioned, so that's why when I use move, when I use copy, everything depends on how you can represent, these, this one, and this one. All right. And even this. All right. So just to give you a small little note, and I'll probably create a small little, bash notes, and I'll share that on my GitHub so that, you just use it as a reference. Yeah, this is my notes. You don't have to necessarily use them. I'm just going to create a small little bash notes, and I'll hopefully share it on GitHub so that, if you watch this video and you're like, I don't know what to do, just look at it and be like, oh yeah, I know what this guy is talking about. You love it. All right. At least I should make one for myself, because I just use very few commands, and there are people, who use like a lot more commands, and they're way more, and I've used this for a long time. I've used this for almost 10 years, and I work with the limited tools that I know. And believe me, it gets me a long way, to a point that I love Linux, that I can work in the way that I want with the limited tools that I want. You can do a lot with it. I don't need to know all of it. That's my point. Like, just know the stuff that gets you comfortable with the tool, with the software, with this operating system, so that you can do the stuff that you want. It's just a means to an end. That's it. Right? That's all I do, even with a graphical user interface. I create a new directory, I close a new directory, I delete a file, I add a file, I move a file, I copy a file, I create a folder. That's really it. And I'm just doing it in a shell command. But I can do it much faster, and it's way more intuitive. All right, so make sense of it. So as we mentioned, copy means copying a file. So copying is the same way you use move, you can use copy. They have the exact same flow. The only difference is one is moving and one is copying. One is creating 2 files and one is moving the file from one place to another place. So if I have an ls over here and I want to move my bash notes to another folder, which we just did, or if I want to copy it, you can just basically click move. I'm just going to take my bash notes and I'm copying it to say C_programming, and I moved it. So it's no more in here. And now when I go to C_programming, I should find my bash notes in here. And if I want to move it back, again, I just have to click C programming. So I'm just going to click move C programming bash notes. So I'm basically going to the file system that I want. I could also type in this way, As I mentioned, I can go to my home directory because I know it's in my home directory. It is exactly the same thing. Or I can use where my folder is currently and type in the folder that is, in the subdirectory. And I can move it to my current directory. The dot means current directory. Very important. Dot means current directory. Let's do the same exercise and go to the inner folder and then move it to the upper folder, to this particular current folder. So for example, if I'm going to exercise the same thing, I'm going to move this back to where it was. Actually, you know what? I'm going to move it back to show you it's moved back. So we got bash nodes back. So now I'm going to move it back to the current folder. No, it's not there. Move it to here. So if I move this back, so now when I go to C_programming, now I have bash nodes, and now if I want to move this to the root directory or to the one directory above us, which is the top the directory that contains this particular C programming, I can just do a move bash nodes, and I use this command // dot means previous directory. I can even use this. Press enter. It's no more in here. cd to .. which takes me to the upper directory, and now I've moved this file over here. All right. So working with the file system is a little tricky in this sense. Requires practice. There's no amount of tutorials that can really help you get around with it. You just need to practice. Type in move, copy bash script to C programming. Type in a folder. It can be, type in a folder and start moving it. Move it to the previous upper directory. Maybe type // Now it might say, permission denied. We'll talk about permissions shortly. And if you want to move it to a folder that you have access to, which is, to another. So you want to move a file that is, say, in another folder. So you want to copy, say, C programming. I want to copy my main.c to my current directory. Main.c to my current directory. I can click dot. So this means source, and this means destination. Just to make sense, this is source, this is destination. So copy source to destination, and here we have it. And it took me a while to explain this. So source, destination, move, copy, work the same way, source and destination. Okay. Now that we're focused on move, copy, search, source, destination, make directory, and remove directory, let's move on to a few other things. Say, for example, I click on bash nodes and I type in copy, and I type in, say, copy ls file. Let's put in all the things that we've touched on so far. Remove dir, make dir. What else have we done? We have used the word command touch. Let's use the word. What else have we used? Move. We have used syntaxes, and we've used, let's say, the most important things are like root. This means root. This means previous directory. This means current directory. And then what else did we type in? This means home directory. And I'll show you why I'm typing all of this. So copy will have the syntax of source, destination, move will also have something like this. I'm using VI. I know we haven't spoken about VI, but I will talk about this shortly. So the next command that I want to show you is, now I want to find out what is all we also put in the word clear, right? So we also use the word clear, so to clear all the. So now I want to see what is in that file. So I can use the word cat command, the cat command, and just click bash notes, and it shows me all of this. I can even put in, say, less. We'll talk about piping later on. Piping will not be in this part of this video. I'll talk about how piping works. Piping is basically taking an output of one program and feeding it as an input to another program. that will be a little bit more intermediate video, but in this particular case, I'm just going to show you, certain commands that can just help you get started for a beginner. So a cat command allows me to list all the files within all the contents of that file. So that's what cat does. So I can do a cat bash script, and it tells me all the contents of that particular file. So use that as a way to, view your file. Now, another thing that I personally use, I use VI. There's another text editor called Nano, and then you can use Emac and all that cool stuff. I use VI. So VI is a handy tool for you to view files. Not everybody uses it. Not everybody likes using it because there are certain syntaxes that are required in order for you to use VI. So if I put in VI, say bash notes, now VI bash notes, it lists me the file. Now, if I want to quit this file, so this is where VI is very frustrating for most people, is because the syntax, you need to be very well versed with the syntax in order for you to use VI. And if you're not well versed with the syntax, it's very difficult to navigate through VI. Because now, how do I quit? I don't know what to quit. How do I quit? And you'd just be like a monkey trying to play a Beethoven. Basically, that's what it's going to sound like. If you do not know what you're doing, because you're just going to press a lot of buttons and just get very frustrated as to how to go about navigating. If you want to quit UBI, :Q. All right. So colon, every time you type a syntax, it'll all be in the bottom over here. This is very important. Without this, you can't quit the editor. So Q. So this is a command that you just got to be very well versed with. Quit, and it'll quit you, and it'll exit VI. If you do not know this command, and you're not going to figure it out. It's quit, but what quit? But you got to put in that colon, the double dots. Without putting that, the command, it won't accept the command. It means that it doesn't know whether you're in editor mode or whether you're in command mode. So there's two types of modes in VI. Command mode is exactly you're commanding VI to quit or commanding VI to do certain cool stuff. So I'll have a video tutorial on VI later, how I use it. But for now, just open it with VI and just put 2 dots and Q and get out of VI. We'll edit things later on. And for editing, actually, I can just teach you how to do editing. So for editing, you just click I. I means insert. So, and when I put I, that means I can type anything. And if I do not want to put I, just press escape and then put :Q. All right. So in this particular case, for VI, to start editing, type I. To quit, type ESC, press escape, and then :Q. Escape, and then put +:Q. To save, type ESC. Come on. C +:W. These 3 things will allow you to be a little sane with VI. I for inserting, :Q for quitting, :W for saving. So I can click save and then :Q quit. It's alright, just get used to it. Why these commands are that way and it's not some other way, don't ask me. Alright. And we're going to go through 3 more commands, which is going to be figuring out what path is, and we're going to focus on alias, and we're going to focus on chmode. All right. So the last few commands that I'm going to focus on are chmode. So if I do an ls.alrt, and if I, leave alone this, say for what does this do, and what does this do? These are permissions for this folder. All right. So when I want to change a folder's permission, so if I click and say vi if I do a ls notes, bash notes, it has these permissions, right? So I can change these permissions. So if I do a chmode, I can basically convert this into a script. If I do a chmode +x and I click bash notes, it allows me to change the mode of this particular file. It allows me to change the mode. I can even do a chmode, give privileges to everybody across if I put a 777, it basically gives privileges for everybody in this particular operating system to have access to this file, to change, modify, edit, and be an owner of it. And if I just want myself, I can just put, 7 is for me, 7 is for each one of this, represents, different types of users within the file system. One is, the administrator, one is your current, you as a user, and then third is, general users all around the system. So that's basically what it is. So chmode is especially if you want to, if you create a script, and if it's not an executable script, then you want to change the mode. So I won't go more into details about this. This is very one of the things that you might want to use is make it global access. If you're storing a file that needs to be written by a certain process, you might want to change the ownership or change the group. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in another video, because I do feel this is a little bit intermediate to understand how users and file systems work over here. But I'm just introducing it to you in a way that that just be aware of this command, that if you want to change the mode of your file or a folder, these commands allow you to change these things of a folder. So let's give an example. If I put in, like, say 111 in here for bash notes, and I do this, all of a sudden you realize that no one has any read write access. You have only executable access. And if I change this to, say, chmode 775, so 77 means all privileges to a user, and 5 means semi-privileges to a user. And you can really see that now this one, everybody has read write and execution access, read write, and X means execution access. And then the last person only has read access and execution access. They don't have write access. So 5 basically means you can read and you cannot you can execute, but you cannot write. That's really it. And each of these 3 groups of people are basically, as I mentioned, the root, your current user, and then the global, everybody else outside the root and you. So that's about it. If you're running a command, let's say for example we're using grep, you're using mlocate, as we mentioned over here, all right? Mlocate, and so we're updating the DB from mlocate, update DB, and I do a sudo. This is going to take a long time to update, right? And you're frustrated. You need to go out somewhere, and you want to stop the system. Use Ctrl+C. Ctrl+C will just terminate that particular program. Ctrl+C basically sends a signal to that program to terminate. It's every program generally, if you write, should have a capability of accepting the signal and terminating. And this is like forcing that program to basically terminate. This is what Ctrl+C is. So it's a handy tool if things are taking too long and you don't know what's happening and you want to stop the program from executing. Press Ctrl+C. Okay. In the next video, in part 2, I will go more into detail about things like path variables. I'll talk about aliases. I'll talk a little bit about the bash RC. So as soon as you start your bash, you'll be able to say for example have certain commands that by default allows you to execute things like your path variables and what your C++ libraries, what your LD path is, having certain features of your bash to work so that you don't have to keep scrambling for where these binaries are. I'll also talk about having and setting up your own alias files, and this will be alias alias, where you can basically create all of these aliases for you so that you don't have to type in the full command. You can just use one entry and it'll be able to execute those things for you. So we're going to talk about that in the next video. We'll also talk a little bit more about chmode and chown. What is chmode is what we spoke briefly about, but chown is chowner, who's the owner of this program. We'll talk about su and sudo access, super user and sudo. We did speak a little bit about sudo. Sudo is basically the person who has, if there's certain files that needs executable privileges or root privileges, you need to put in sudo and type in the word. That's what we did for sudo update DB. That basically means that no one can just use the command. Only the root user can use the command, or someone with super privileges can use the command. That's what sudo basically means. And then part 3, we'll probably start to create some bash scripts that can help us automate certain tasks. So that's what this 3-part series of video is. I hope you got the most out of it. Use this tool. This is just a way to introduce you to bash, for you to get familiar with the bash scripting shell. And as you practice this, at the end of the day, it's all about practice. You can see all these videos and read all these books without practicing. It's just not going to really, you're not going to get a feel of it. You need to have the muscle memory. and you just need to just type and work with this environment, immerse yourself in this, and you will start to realize the power of it. And you just have to muscle through the initial stages of frustration in the beginning, and it's actually fun once you realize how much control you have over your operating system and the cool stuff that you can do, the automations you can do, that is so difficult to do with Windows or with any other operating system, or without using the command line, basically, that your graphical user interface is not quite fit for doing certain things of that sort. So that's all there is for this video. It's been a little long video. It's almost an hour. I hope you got the most out of it, and until next time, take care.